What is a food that makes you think, how did humans discover this was edible? Story 1. As a homebrewer, I'll say beer. Yes, it's made with grains, but you have to let those grains just begin to germinate. Then roast them to stop the germination, but not too much. Then mill the grains and mash them at a certain temperature. Temperature at mashing can affect the ABV in the final product, but just fermenting that results in mead, which is quite sweet. Some like it. I can't stand it. So someone said, let's put some bitter stuff in there to even things out. God love whoever came up with that idea. Story 2, ghost peppers, like actual ghost peppers, not the watered-down ghost pepper stuff you can buy at a supermarket. Only humans would go, oh my God, my mouth is on fire. Oh fuck, oh shit. Oh no, I'm blind because I rubbed the tears out of my eyes after touching this. Water is not doing much. Am I gonna die? And then, immediately after go, yeah, that was fun. I want to do that again. I have no room to talk for the record. I love unreasonably spicy things. Excellent to have when you've got blocked sinuses you need to clear out too. Story 3. For me, it's always eggs. I get it. Every part of the animal is edible. But I'm not sure I'd see an egg come out and think, I bet that's delicious with toast. I'm sure they saw animals eat them and went from there. But if you had a raw one, nothing would make you think there's one way to make them taste good, let alone 100. Story 4. I've always had a similar question about drugs, like, some guy smoked some random plant one day and found out it got him high and probably spent the rest of his life smoking carrots and broccoli trying to find out what else worked. Or like people found out that sea coca leaf got them high, who realized at some point that if you do this insane list of crazy things to the leaf and strain it through gasoline and stuff, then it turns into a white powder you are supposed to snort. Like how long did it take to get from point A to point B there? Story 5. All those poisonous things that required trial and death was a good way to weed out the idiots of the group. Grog, look at this beautiful mushroom. Eat it. Unfortunately, the process was not sufficient to really elevate the human species to the next level. Story 6. Almonds. Every party of the plant is poisonous except for the tiny bit inside a shell. The shell is poisonous too. Cassava. Unless genetically modified or prepared at the perfect time, they are cyanide capsules. Elderberries, ESP red as unless the berry is perfectly ripe, and some species not then it's deadly. Potato, only the tuber is non-toxic once it's ripe. Every other bit is highly poisonous. Story 7. Instead, I like to think how truly hard life was for them to make such risky, by 2024 standards, decisions. It's not just the risk, it's the brutality they must have engaged in. The only reason each of us exists is because our ancestors took enormous risk and frightening brutality to pass on our DNA. No ifs, ands, or buts. Natural selection, like market economies, is brutal. The smartphone I'm typing this on wouldn't exist without either. Story 8. They first watched animals to see what they ate. They watched animals to see what they ate when they were sick, for ideas about medicine. Another idea was that a nomadic tribe had a taster who would take tiny bites of a new plant to check for effects. Effects were noted for use in medicine. If the taster ate a whole stomach full of a plant with no effect, they'd use it for food. Story 9. A lot of the foods PPL be saying in the comments are only weird from a modern perspective, because to us, the processes involved do not seem intuitive at all. But to ancient humans, who had lots of fucking free time, figuring out what stuff is edible wouldn't be some wild, hair-brained guesswork. Humans are pattern recognition geniuses. The leap from baby animal drink this to me drink this isn't a leap. In fact, most of the this food requires like 8 steps to make, and who the heck figured all that out foods can be summed up as we saw animals eat it and not die, and each step in the process make it taste less like poisonous death. So we kept going until it wasn't poison anymore. You gotta remember, people 10,000 years ago are the same, biologically, as we are, the same brains, the same curiosity, the same capacity to recognize patterns. The difference is, they were mostly much more fit than we are, and had much more free time than we do. Story 10. My guess is that earlier populations had far more highly developed senses, and thus were more in tune with nature. Perhaps they went off smell or texture. We still do that to some extent today. If meat goes bad, we can smell it. If we see fur, mold, growing on food, we know not to eat it, except if it's blue cheese. I have no idea how they figured that one out. Story 11. Honestly, I think a lot of food discoveries make sense if you recall that before chemical fertilizer was invented, humanity dealt with famines a lot. It's a horseman of the apocalypse that the West has pretty much defeated, outside of financial-related food insecurity. Someone finding solidified and mold-covered milk in their cellar and eating it for the LOLs and discovering cheese doesn't make nearly as much sense as they were starving and had nothing else to eat and nothing left to lose. Story 12. I wonder this sort of thing all the time, such as cookies, cake, and brownies, etc. How did someone figure out how to make that stuff and with the ingredients used? You mix eggs and other stuff into the batter. Think about it. It's really weird all the different stuff you put in the batter, bake it for a while, and it somehow turns into a delicious treat. But who the heck thought up the idea to mix eggs and stuff together to create them? It's so weird. Also, Greenland shark is something the Inuit eat, but you have to let it ferment for a while for it to be edible, because otherwise it's poisonous. How did they figure that out? Story 13, soy sauce. I've watched lengthy documentary videos on the traditional processes of making soy sauce, and it absolutely boggles my mind how anyone ever developed it. Various fermented fish or legume sauces make some level of sense in how one might stumble into it or puzzle it out with enough tinkering. But nothing about the creation of soy sauce seems intuitive. I struggle to figure out how people managed their way through it, without tossing the batch out a fraction of the way through thinking it had just all gone rotten. Story 14. Some obvious ones are things like cheese or wine, alcohol. Seems like both would be so noticeably different and weird compared to what the person would have remembered leaving. Weird to think you'd just give your solid rancid milk a try. Also weird to think of things that are toxic unless you cook them. Like fiddleheads. Like, all right, last time I ate them, my mouth itched and I had a wild stomach ache. Let's boil them for 10 minutes this time. Story 15. The national dish of Iceland is rotting shark. This is totally from memory, so maybe someone can correct me. The local sharks have a high content of urea in their blood, which the sharks use as antifreeze. It makes the meat totally rancid and impossible to eat. But if you hang up the shark carcass and let it ferment, rot, for a few months, the urea changes into something else and the fish becomes edible. The Swedish have surströmming, which is a different rotting fish. YouTube is full of fun videos about surströmming. Humans usually have a violent gag reaction when they smell it, but dogs appear to love it. For both of these, it just sounds like people were really hungry. Story 16. Fiddleheads. They come from one specific type of fern, the ostrich fern, that is less toxic, not non-toxic, than other kinds. You have to cook them long enough to get rid of the toxin, otherwise you get sick from them. The fact that someone was dedicated enough to find the one fern you can eat, but only after it's cooked, is wild to me. I'm glad they were, though, because I love fiddleheads. Story 17, corn. Sure, you can eat it, but you'll get pellagra, niacin deficiency, if you don't nixtamalize it or supplement with a different food source. For corn to be a staple, it needs to be soaked in lime and ash, not delicious. The native folks of the Americas knew about it, but it didn't always get applied in the non-native populations or worldwide was maize corn cultivation went worldwide. Pellagra was a real problem in the US even just 100 years ago. Story 18, stone pets. Kind of eat, or at least part of the process. I've been told there is a type of psychedelic mushroom that when eaten will make the consumer incredibly sick, like hospital visit sick. But if you drink the urine of someone who has recently consumed the mushroom, you will get the experience without the toxic elements. Apparently the kidneys are really good fillers. I mean, how do you get to that point? Story 19 category, trials and errors. Cashews, blowfish, human meat, oysters. Category. Someone had some insane ideas. Yogurt, quesillo, okra soup, bloatfish, alcohol, any type of homebrew-related beverage, all plant-based food that tries to imitate meat, all other meat from weird animals that tastes like chicken, any food that requires an insane method of preparing that hinges between life and death, chicken, pork, and beef-related, the insane amount of dishes around these animals. Category, weird fashion style, any food that used to be for the poor in the old days, and are now only available for the rich in this time. Any food that used to be region-specific dishes, but are available around the world. Story 20. The Jamaican and West African fruit aki. You need to wait until the fruit is yawning or smiling at you. For example, when the fruit naturally ripens and opens itself up. This causes the seeds to absorb the toxic compounds and presents a delicious fruit to harvest. Pluck it and open it early, and you're bound to get sick and may die. Must have been one of those things where they observed some creatures living after eating the opened fruit, but witnessed others having a bad time when they ate it prematurely. Story 21. Simple as fuck around and find out is, I always say, good or bad results. Also, we're talking about 1,000s and 1,000s of years of do animals eat it? And Ding Dong over there ate it and it messed him up. Our brains separate us from animals in the idea that we're just clever and stupid all at once. Fuck around and find out or learn from example and elaborate on the results. IDK good conversation anyhow. Story 22. Castoreum, Kaestoriam, is a yellowish exudate from the castor sacs of mature beavers. It's used to mimic flavors like raspberry, strawberry, and vanilla in packaged foods. I'm sure the process went something like, someone killed a beaver, ate it, and discovered the contents of anal gland had a different interesting flavor. But what I like to imagine is that someone had a sandwich one time and was like, this sandwich is good, but it's missing something, and I will not rest until I figure out what it is. And my gift to you. FDA considers it natural and food safe, and companies are not required to list it specifically on packaging. You've probably eaten it. Even worse, if they can call beaver butt juice generically natural, what else falls under other natural ingredients? Story 23. Many years ago, I was watching a show about tribal people on an Indonesian island, and it mentioned this dish that they ate regularly. It was from the interior of a plant and required fairly extensive preparation because it's poisonous to just eat. I had to wonder about how long it took them to figure out the steps to make something like that into food. Story 24. Milk. Our early ancestors were all lactose intolerant after childhood, but some humans really wanted to keep drinking milk. This is in spite of the fact they would suffer bad diarrhea. They did this for thousands of years until eventually those human groups evolved to have lactose tolerance. Think about that. In order to make a food edible to ourselves, we just decided to put up with it, making us sick until we could evolve to be able to eat it. Story 25. Salt and Himalayan salt. Chipping away at rocks, and then someone's like, hey Jerry, I dare you to lick this rock, and then decide it's better in grain-sized crystals to put over food. Probably using it as a preservative came about accidentally, left a piece of meat on top of a salt block and suddenly seasoned and dried parts of it. Story 26. Faidherbia albida, formerly Acacia albida. The Gwembe Tonga boil and eat the seeds during times of famine after an extensive detoxification process. The beans must be boiled for at least a day. After a prolonged soaking and cooking, the beans are shelled and then cooked a second time in a water solution of ashes. Not until this has been poured off and the beans soaked but not cooked in a third change of water is the food edible. Text tweaked from https://www.purdue.edu/hla/sites/famine. Food/famine_food/acacia albida/ confirming my memory from an anthropology course some decades back. Story 27. Probably anything that has to do with lots of fermenting and waiting, like making cheese or wine. Probably starts with, man, I don't want to waste any food, but that shit smells funky ASF. Like, still you gotta be either desperate or mad brave chugging fruits that smells rotten for the first time, and eat blocks of curdled milk, hoping that you won't die of diarrhea afterwards, lol. The first guy to get drunk probably was mad scared for his life, haha. Definitely thinks the fruit poisoned him bad. Story 28. Eggs. I personally think they're disgusting, and that they come out of the chicken's ass in hell. When I think about how the first Neanderthal or human or whatever, back in time, was foraging around, hungry AF, happened upon a chicken, saw something come out of its ass and thought, I'm going to eat that. That was one hungry motherfucker. Story 29. Alcohol. Imagine what the first cup of unrefined alcohol that was probably just the juice from some grain that got really expired and thought, you know what? I'm going to drink this insanely bitter and acrid fermented grain juice and see what happens. Then imagine being the first person to get drunk and the hangover that must have caused, and then they just want to keep making more. Story 30. Most seafood, particularly shellfish. Cashews. The shells have a lining that is filled with toxic fluid. Who was the unlucky bastard who figured that out? And after that lovely discovery, why did they constantly try to make them edible? Mushrooms? Some okay, some deadly. Others will just make you see really weird shit for a couple of hours. Who gotta be the guinea pig for that? Poppy seeds. A little bit in baked goods? Fine. A lot of them? That battle wound suddenly doesn't hurt anymore, and you may find yourself in danger of dying from an opium overdose. Human beings have a whole history of fuck around and find out. We really all should have died off as a species. Yet here we are. Story 31. Civet coffee. Who thought that brewing coffee beans found in the poop of a civet cat would be something one should even consider doing, much less doing it? Bird's nest soup. Chinese soup made from the dried gelatinous coating of the nests of swifts and other birds. Who studies birds' nests to realize there is a gelatinous coating on the nest, much less realize that the gelatinous coating might be edible? When you see where they harvest a lot of these bird nests, it becomes even more of a mystery. Balut, look it up. Story 32. The myth of the discovery of coffee. Omar was something of a troublemaker. He never said his prayers. He would get drunk in the middle of the day. He swindled merchants in the marketplace. The townspeople had had enough, and they exiled Omar. While wandering in the desert, in desperation, he gathered the seeds of those bitter berries that even the goats won't eat. He roasted them, but they still weren't good. He ground them up, but they still weren't good. Finally, he poured hot water over them to make a sort of soup, and amazingly, it worked. Not only that, but he miraculously survived his ordeal in the desert and made it back to town alive. The townspeople were skeptical, of course. Omar always had some scheme, and now he wanted them to drink this magical bitter bean water? Well, long story short, the townspeople did try it. Their town became the most renowned center Islamic scholarship, and Omar was forever remembered as a defender of the faith. Coffee. It will make even Omar a good Muslim. Story 32. Buah keluak, a kind of nut from Indonesia, whose shell is naturally laced with cyanide. It is often stewed in Indonesian cuisine and Peranakan cuisine in Singapore and Malaysia. Fortunately, we prepare it by first soaking the shells in water and washing them by scrubbing to remove any traces of cyanide before eating. Cyanide is easily water-soluble. A fun fact is that among Peranakan Chinese families in Singapore and Malaysia, buah keluak chicken stew is usually eaten as a Chinese New Year dish. Story 33. Carrots. Every other member in that family of plants, including many that look exactly like carrots, for example hemlock, are deadly poison. Not the stomachache kind, mind you, but the eat just a fingernail-size portion of this and you die agony kind. Must have been like agonizing death, agonizing death, agonizing death. Hey wait, this one has no taste, and I am still alive. What about this one? 3 more agonizing deaths later. Wait, what was the one that one guy ate who didn't die horribly as soon as he ate it?